Joining me now is Dan McClory. He's Managing Director and Head of China for Boustead Securities. Dan, there's simply no getting around it. I mean, this had to be a virtual event. But how do you measure success this year, given all the uncertainties of the pandemic? I mean, in years past, you'd go to a crowded facility, you're like, okay, people are cutting deals. How do you know this time around?
Well, Mike, it's a really good point, but let me just start by saying, contrary to a lot of trade fairs and trade shows around the rest of the world, this event is still taking place. What do they say, 90% is showing up? Or sometimes your greatest ability is your availability? I mean, this event is available. 26,000 virtual booths. We've heard that they're hard to come by. 1.8 million products. I mean, so I think just opening the fair and having it continue its streak is quite an accomplishment. So being there, being in the game, being exposed to your competitors as well as buyers is super important. And to have created that aura in this post-COVID world is quite an accomplishment.
Dan, as you know, China had to deal with this coronavirus early on, kind of turned the corner. There are some issues in Beijing with some new cases. But where is China's economy right now? Because it's such a global entity, and I mean, other places are not doing as well. I mean, how is China being affected in terms of the economy?
Well, clearly the lag effect with the rest of the world coming back from COVID is impacting China. You know, most obviously in terms of exports, but also in terms of some of the products coming into China. So China can start on its road to recovery, and I think 90% of industrial output is already back, and you know that's an incredible statistic. But really, the world economies are so intertwined. So until the rest of the world starts making their comeback, there will be constraints on China. There are obviously things like pent-up demand for autos and homes, which we saw surge in May. But really, the rest of the world has to get back on its feet, and then this global economy will start functioning with a big impact on China.
And COVID-19 seems to be hitting some regions really hard. We're seeing a lot in Latin America, some new hotspots there. It's relaxing some other areas. How do you see this impacting an already sputtering global economy?
I see a couple of silver linings to all of this, and that is, number one, the will of the people is to get back to work and to get the economy going, whether it's in China, which has demonstrated that in the last 8 weeks, coming back and getting pretty close to full throttle already. And also other events can sometimes displace what seems like just the all-encompassing downward dragging impact of COVID. You know, we've seen that around the world with recent events involving various movements. So I think that's a little bit of a silver lining, that it doesn't have to be the deal killer and the deal stopper that we thought that it was. People want to get back, they want to buy, they want to spend, they want to work. And I think we're going to keep seeing more of that.
And as we look at China, this event itself, virtual as it is this year, it's about imports and exports. How are both going to be impacted in China? Which one are you keeping your eye on the most?
Well, clearly right now it's about exports, I think, because so many of the rest of the countries in the world have really curtailed and cut back their purchases. So that obviously has an effect on China. Imports, you know, this global supply chain is so interdependent that there are a lot of products that maybe could get from one country into China, or you know, from a couple of countries. But when you take a sophisticated global supply chain, it really makes it difficult. But I'll tell you one export from China that we have seen endure and still going gangbusters, and that's IPOs, or initial public offerings. This is a financial export, but Chinese companies continue to be prolific in listing their shares on international stock exchanges. NYSE, NASDAQ, both of them in New York. Lots of Chinese IPOs this year. The London Stock Exchange is about to see a really big one coming from China. So China continues to bring these financial products to the market and show that there's global demand for investors to be a part of that China growth story.
Dan, quickly, if you can, before we let you go, what kind of a recovery are we going to see? A lot of people saying, you know, it's not going to be a V, it's going to be something else. What do you see it looking like?
I think it is sector dependent, but if you ask me to give an overall, there's definitely going to be lags. I think the V, if there is one in the U.S., is going to lag the time frame that we've seen things start to come back in China, simply because of the all-encompassing nature of COVID and how it has just really infiltrated every single sector. But I think in the U.S. we're definitely looking at more of a V. Globally, it's going to be region dependent. And China uniquely, because it's so intertwined with the rest of the world, really has a foot in both of those camps. It can't just pull itself out with a strong domestic economy and consumer spending. It also depends on the rest of the world. Some of the other world economies are a little more together. They're a little more segregated. But China uniquely has immersed itself with the rest of the world.